Right now, somewhere over the Atlantic, a few hundred people are asleep 3 meters away from what most of us would call a controlled explosion. A fire hotter than lava, running nonstop for 8 hours. Except here's the thing, it's not an explosion. It's something far stranger. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why the metal sitting in that fire should be melting, and isn't. Start with the question everyone gets wrong. What is a jet engine actually pushing against? Most people picture the exhaust shoving against the air behind the plane like an oar pushing water. That's wrong. A jet engine doesn't need anything behind it at all. It works by grabbing a mass of air, doing work on it, and hurling it backward. Newton's third law does the rest. Accelerate gas one way, and the engine gets shoved the other way with equal force. The thrust is just the mass of gas times how much you speed it up. Momentum exchange, all of it happening inside the engine. It's the same reason a rocket works in the vacuum of space, where there's nothing behind it to push on. So the whole job of a jet engine is accelerate air. How? Engineers have a 4-word summary they teach on day 1, suck, squeeze, bang, blow. Your car engine does those same 4 jobs. Pull air in, squeeze it, burn fuel, let it expand. But there's one enormous difference. In a piston engine, those jobs take turns in the same cylinder. In a jet engine, all 4 happen at the same time continuously in different sections of the machine. The cycle isn't laid out in time, it's laid out in space. Walk from the front of the engine to the back, and you're walking through the Brayton cycle. Compression, combustion, expansion, with the atmosphere itself closing the loop by cooling the exhaust back down. Let's walk it. First, squeeze, and this is the step that makes or breaks the whole engine. Before you burn a single drop of fuel, the compressor crushes the incoming air to raise its pressure. Why bother? Because Brayton cycle efficiency rises directly with pressure ratio. The harder you squeeze before you burn, the more useful work you extract from the same fuel. And the numbers here are absurd. A typical industrial gas turbine squeezes air about 11 to 16 times atmospheric pressure. A modern airliner turbofan at cruise, around 40 to 1, measured from the front of the fan to the exit of the last compressor stage. The air arriving at the fire has been packed to around 40 times the pressure it had a second earlier. Now the bang, and here's where I owe you a correction, because I called this thing a controlled explosion at the top of the video, and strictly speaking, it isn't one. In your car, combustion really is a series of confined explosions, sharp pressure spikes, thousands per minute. In a jet engine, fuel sprays into that compressed air and burns continuously at roughly constant pressure. No detonation, no pressure spike, just a steady, unbroken flame running at around 1700 degrees Celsius, hour after hour. And that continuity is the whole trick. It's exactly what lets a jet engine deliver enormous, steady power instead of a machine gun stutter of bangs. So the honest headline isn't controlled explosion, it's weirder, a fire that never stops. But that raises the obvious question. What's spinning the compressor? The answer is the most extreme component on the aircraft. The turbine. Right behind the combustor, rows of blades sit in the exhaust stream and harvest its energy to drive the shafts that spin the compressor and the fan, extracting as much as 60% of the exhaust energy before what's left blasts out the nozzle. And now do the math on those blades. The gas arriving at the turbine entry is around 1400 degrees Celsius. The nickel superalloy the blades are made of starts to melt at roughly 1300. The blade is living in gas hotter than its own melting point. So why isn't the back of every jet engine a puddle? A stack of tricks. Each blade is honeycombed with internal cooling passages fed by cooler air bled from the compressor. That air then leaks out through tiny holes and wraps the blade in a thin protective film. On top of that sits a ceramic thermal barrier coating, 1/5 of a millimeter thick, dropping the temperature by 1 to 300 degrees on its own. And the blade itself is cast as a single crystal of metal. Net result, iced at 1400 degrees, metal at only about 930. The blade survives by refusing to ever actually touch the temperature it lives in. Here's where the modern engine pulls its final trick, because everything I've described so far, the core, mostly isn't what's pushing the plane. Look at an airliner engine, and the first thing you see is that giant fan. A lot of people assume it's basically a propeller bolted onto a jet. It's not. It's a compressor stage in its own right, run by its own dedicated turbine at the back of the core, and the duct around it is what keeps it efficient at speeds where open propellers give up. And most of the air that fan grabs never touches fire at all. In a modern high-bypass engine, roughly 80 to 90% of the intake air bypasses the core completely. It just gets accelerated by the fan and thrown backward, cold. That cold stream produces up to about 80% of the total thrust. Read that again. 4/5 of what's pushing the aircraft is air that was never burned. The screaming hot core you've spent this whole video learning about? Its main job is just to spin the fan. Why build it that way? Because of a beautiful piece of physics. For the same thrust, you can throw a little air backward very fast, or a lot of air backward gently. And the gentle option wins. A fast, narrow exhaust wastes energy stirring up the sky behind you, while a wide, slow one leaves less kinetic energy behind in the wake. That's why bypass ratios have grown for decades. High bypass turbofans approach turboprop fuel efficiency while still cruising at high subsonic speed. The latest move is the geared turbofan. Put a gearbox between the turbine and the fan so the fan can spin slower than the turbine that drives it, and fuel burn drops by about 16% versus the previous generation. Every jump in engine efficiency for 50 years has been some version of the same sentence: move more air, more slowly. So how big does this get? The GE9X, built for the Boeing 777X, is the current benchmark. A fan wrapped around a core with a bypass ratio of about 10-1. In November 2017, on a ground test stand in Peebles, Ohio, engineers pushed 1 to triple red line conditions and recorded 134,300 pounds of thrust. A Guinness World Record, beating the 127,900 pounds the GE90 had held since 2002. To be clear, that's a deliberate everything past the stops test figure, not what the engine is certified to do in service. Its actual rating is in the 110,000-pound class. Still over 100,000 pounds of push from a single machine hanging off one wing. Step back and look at what you now know. The jet engine on a modern airliner is mostly not a jet. It's an enormous, precisely ducted air pump, and buried in its heart is a continuous fire whose only real job is to keep the pump spinning. The violence is real: 40 atmosphere pressures, a 1,700-degree flame, blades surviving above their own melting point. But it's all in service of the gentlest possible act, nudging a huge river of cold air backward, a little faster than it arrived. One line so it sticks. A jet engine squeezes air 40-fold, feeds it to a fire that never stops, harvests that fire to spin a giant fan, and it's the fan's cold air, not the flame that actually pushes you across the ocean. But strip the fan in the atmosphere away entirely, and the same third law trick still works, which is how a rocket produces thrust in a perfect vacuum. That's the next video. What happens when the engine has to bring its own air?